Mr. Shapiro, thank you so much for stopping by today. I said it right. It's Shapiro, right?
It is, and thank you for saying it right and having me.
No, no worries. My pleasure. You did throw it up once, and I don't know if it was a LinkedIn post or I think it might have been in your LinkedIn bio where it was there because I noticed the accent on it. I'm like, there's got to be something to this if it's in there. So,
I
look,
know the day I learned how to put the hard, long accent over the I is the day that changed my life on LinkedIn. It's now in my profile. Yes, you're right.
I don't know how to put it on there. I'm literally going to your profile and copying and pasting it whenever I'm speaking with you, and that's it. It's
No,
just a
that
simple copy
that
and paste.
that the accents and the interrobang, one of my most important discoveries as a typologist in life.
Let's start with where you are right now, Evan. So you're the owner and cartographer of, do I call it eShop or do we spell out every word, every letter?
No, ESHAP is right.
ESHAP is right, and you're the owner and you're the cartographer. So tell us what ESHAP is and what your roles there entail as the owner and cartographer.
ESHAP is a creator-led content and insights company. We put out content at high volume on a daily basis on LinkedIn, Substack, podcast, other places. We create insight based on data, but that drives our content. And then for partners, we'll either create content, I'll come and speak, we'll put on an event, we'll create like white papers and studies. And then we also do other types of thought leadership, like the podcast, the Media Odyssey. And then we do consulting, where we come in and we bring our market intelligence to the table. And we basically do what we do for the industry writ large on my Substack and my LinkedIn. We do it for individual partners. So we'll come in and take the data. That's where we start always. And then we create a report and a presentation on what the state of whatever the company wants to know about themselves. And then beyond that, usually there's an assignment on what would you do next with this company or in this area on this project, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at the heart of everything is a narrative around insights about the media universe.
We're going to come back to that later, but as always, we start from the beginning. I see a Philadelphia Eagles t-shirt. Are you a Philly guy or is that just your team?
No, I grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, outside of Philadelphia. My whole family's from Philadelphia. I'm a dyed in the wool, bleeding green Eagles fan, Phillies fan, Sixers fan, Flyers fan. Eagles kind of are a special kind of pain. And I'm actually headed to my 40th high school reunion tomorrow in Cherry Hill.
Nice. So you spent your whole time in Cherry Hill then, if I heard you correctly then.
Say again?
You spent your whole time in Cherry Hill then, born and raised there, if I heard you
No, I was
correctly.
born and raised. No, I was born in Bellefonte, Pennsylvania, right near State College, Penn State. Go Lions! Although fuck Joe Pa. And then moved from there eventually to South Jersey for most of my upbringing. Went to school and then dropped out of University of Massachusetts in Amherst. Moved back to Philly and then have been in New York for 37 years.
What were your interests or hobbies growing up? Like what kept you busy and interested?
I was obsessed with, I very much, the personality I have now is not terribly dissimilar from the personality I had growing up. I was an attention whore from the minute I was born. And my interests were primarily in school theater, was the main thing I focused on. And luckily I went to a high school that it was our biggest sport almost. Massive. Cherry Hill East has one of the largest auditoriums in the state of New Jersey. I think when I was in high school there, it was the largest auditorium in the state of New Jersey. The Miss New Jersey pageant was there a number of years. And we put on huge productions. We toured to Hawaii with one. So that really drove my interest. I got very interested in directing early on in high school, and that continued into college and then into the afterlife of college. And then I somehow morphed into the entertainment business end.
Do you remember that moment that you kind of were bitten by the acting bug? Like what was it that got you into acting?
In fifth grade, I was in a talent show. I wouldn't say acting as much as performing, but when because I love to perform as myself. I'm really bad at every other kind of performance.
Were you
So
doing like the triple threat, like dance,
I
singing,
tried and
and
I
acting?
failed it all. I tried and I failed it all three. I was in the
Jeez.
dance, the high school's dance company. I was in, but that's because there was such a dearth of men who wanted to go to the. I got to miss gym and hang out with very attractive men and women in leotards instead of going to gym. Saw it as a huge opportunity, but I was terrible at that. And then I tried to sing, and I was terrible at that. And I tried to act, and I was terrible at that. But I hosted the talent show in Hebrew school in fifth grade, and I did a Chuck Barris impersonation, who was the host of the Gong Show at the time, and very famously a movie starring George Clooney and Sam Rockwell. But and that really was the moment. That adulation, that fame, was the thing that sparked it for me. I was never good enough to act, and so even in my professional life, I was always good at getting press, doing presentations. I've written blogs for years and years and years and years. So a lot of the stuff I do today, I've tried to do in other versions. I tried to write screenplays and direct when I first moved to New York City. But it is this version of myself, a weird version of stand-up comic meets New Yorker writer about the media industry in particular slash educator. This thing, I mean, it seems to have been the size of suit I was always made for, which is amazing. Now, part of that is the path I took, but the path I took was very unplanned and circuitous and kind of lucky too. So anyway, that was a long answer to a question that I don't know that you even asked.
No, that's good. So, as part of that journey, what was your first ever part-time job or job in general?
My first part-time job, which is on my LinkedIn profile, was stable boy in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, at the Short Hills Stables, which is now a shopping center, as is most of South Jersey, with a good deli in it. And and,
Nice.
and I did it for very similar reasons to the dance company. First of all, I like horses, but I was terrible at riding them. But this was a great way to get free riding lessons, basically, at a really nice stable. But there were also tons of young, attractive people hanging out in this stable who were rich and had horses. So I saw it as an opportunity to make my way in the world. That was my first job.
You mentioned that you were at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, but you dropped out. So, I guess my first question is, what were you studying before we get to why you backed out of school?
They are the same thing. Um, I was kind of forced by my father to study anything other than theater or entertainment in college. And so I went there to major in political science. And then I found a student run theater group called the UMass Music Theater Guild, which I believe is still in existence today. And, and, a great advisor named Judy Gagnon. So she's listening. God love you. And we basically started this group that did theater, mostly musical theater, on the campus, funded by the university and some donations and things like that. That became my focus, which was not a class, because the theater department at UMass at the time was kind of weird and didn't like musicals. So
Really? It was just strictly just plays then and
not
playwrights?
just plays, but like super avant-garde shit too. This is the
Okay.
80s. The
I was
80s.
around for the 80s.
Uh, were you? You
I
look too
was.
young.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind words, but
All
I assure
right.
you. Yep.
Yeah. So this is
You want to chat
19.
about 80s cartoons and movies? I'm your guy.
I would love to. Yeah, but it's 1985. And so I kind of stopped going to class. I basically got high every day, stopped going to class, did rehearsals, did theater, and got to a point where, I mean, God love the University of Massachusetts. They were dumb as bricks. They let me keep matriculating even though I wasn't going to class. They gave me my scholarship money even though I wasn't going to class. So I kind of subsisted on smoking and selling pot and basically directing theater with most of my time. And again, chasing very attractive people around campus to have sex with. So And then eventually that ran out of gas. I dropped out, and that's how that happened. I'll stop that story there.
No, it's all good. So you mentioned that you started to really take up directing, even though early in our conversation you mentioned that you were I think you said the term attention whore. Directors usually end up, I mean, when it comes to musicals or theater, you end up, I don't want to say in the audience, but behind the stage. You're not really front and center there. So what was that transition like for you, moving from being one of the lead cast members to being someone behind the scenes who's pulling all of the levers and pulling this all together?
Well, what's fascinating is that in the theater of your personal life, being the center of attention has different relative sizes. So I became relatively famous within a certain circle of stupid cable channels, right? Like at some point. And at the same time, I was able to greenlight and have big impact on shows like Portlandia and This Film Is Not Yet Rated and a whole bunch of other really great creative. So it took a long time for me to get from making something to doing that. But that journey was very instructive for me. At some point after executive producing, I missed the high touch of creativity. But I'm not a screenwriter, and I'm not an actor, and I'm not a set builder. And so what I do now is as creative an endeavor as I've ever done. I wake up every morning and I write, and usually design something. This morning I wrote something and designed a pie chart, but it had a look and feel to it, and it referred to my map and media universe. And so that was the first 2 hours of my morning, every morning. And by the way, that drives my entire business. And then the rest of the day was spent around the things I make and write, an event I'm planning for a partner, other things. And so this is, even though I'm not making television shows or theater or dance or any of that kind of stuff in any way, shape, or form anymore, I am more creative now than I've ever been. And I couldn't have been where I am now if I didn't go through the transition from artist to executive and manager and boss to exiled executive manager and boss to writer, map maker, speaker, whatever the fuck I do now.
You mentioned that when you were enrolling at UMass, that it was important to your father that you were taking a kind of a traditional academic discipline. When you dropped out, what was that conversation like with him?
It was really bad.
Uh, he wasn't happy about that?
Well, first I was dishonest about it. I lied to him about it. And then basically at 21, embarrassingly ran away from home to a job that I had invented that didn't exist in LA. He then flew to Los Angeles, beat me there,
Oh, geez.
and
Okay.
then dragged my ass back to New York on a 4-day drive across. I'm sorry, to Philadelphia, to Cherry Hill, on a 4-day drive across the United States, which was terrifying. I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail here, but just he was a big dude and I was not. I still am not. And it was a terrifying trip. And that we really never reconciled from that point forward, which I take some of the blame for, but I also apportion a decent amount to him. And, the most important part is, you know, from that moment on, my life took on a very different trajectory, all of which has been up and to the right. So I'm very happy about that.
So when you got back to the East Coast, is this where you found the role of head of marketing at the Public Theater? Or was there something in
No,
between
no,
that?
no. I moved to New York. I moved back to Cherry Hill. I got away from my somewhat abusive father, and moved in with my mom. And while I was there, I was waiting tables. I ran into a high school fellow alum of mine, not a romantic interest during high school, even though I had a crush on her, and I don't know if she did on me. She was in the orchestra and I was in the shows, so we kind of crossed, but never really hung out. And we started dating, and that became my wife. And we've been married for 30 some odd 33 years. And during that time, I moved to New York. And what happened was I worked in a series of really interesting nonprofit, for-profit performing arts jobs during the day and directed and wrote theater at night. And that was just, I mean, we're living in an artist's lifestyle. I was making $15,000 a year, living in an apartment that cost $200 a month. It was just a really romantic time artistically and kind of whatever. New York was a shithole. Subways didn't work. There was no air conditioning on the subways. I saw a man get shot on my
God.
block the week I moved in to Brooklyn, but that neighborhood is now one of the nicest neighborhoods in Brooklyn, by the way. So, my life connected to New York and in the arts and in entertainment really started, and the riveting nature of my codependency with New York at that time while I was directing in church basements. What a cliche, but it was just so exciting. It was a lot of fun. And that dual track continued until I became the head of marketing of the New York Shakespeare Festival. And they even let me continue to do that while I was there. I would disappear every summer and go direct a play in summer stock theater. And then I decided to start my own agency for live entertainment. And it became very clear that I could not go off and write and direct plays. I also, by the way, had a 6-month-old baby.
Mm.
And I don't remember how old I was. I was 31. And no, I'm sorry. Let's see, hold on. This is 1996. So I was 29 and started an agency. And there was no way, and our clients included the people who went on to produce Chicago on Broadway, who hadn't yet. It's now the third longest running show of all time. The people who went on to produce The Lion King,
They
Disney.
Yep. No, they came through. It sounds like they came through because it was called Forefront, right?
Yeah,
This was Forefront.
it's exactly right. So all of these clients were now looking to us, and this is after I had done some decent work at the Public Theater and gotten some notoriety. So they were all going to hire us, but there was no way I could go disappear at 5 o'clock because I had a rehearsal. There was no way I could go out to summer stock and direct theater there. And I had a baby at home. My wife and I had a baby at home. And by the way, my wife was also the CFO of this agency. So I couldn't have it both ways anymore. And it was at that moment in time, I actually literally gave up writing and directing creatively that way, theater, television, film.
Was that
And
difficult prioritizing that? Saying to
it was
yourself, there's certain things I have to shed if I'm going to be good at the few things I absolutely need to do?
the only way I could manage it psychologically was to make a deal with myself that I was going to become so good at marketing that someone was going to give me the opportunity to make art again. And that happened. That's exactly what happened. But I remember hanging up the phone with one of my best friends at the time and a good friend over my whole adult life, Ross Meyerson. And he ran a theater in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, actually near where I was born. And I was supposed to go there and direct, I believe it was The Foreigner. And I had to call him 3 or 4 weeks. This is how much I didn't want to do it. I waited
Mm.
until about a month before the production was supposed to go up to call him because I was trying to figure out a way to make it work. And it was like 10 o'clock at night. I was in my new office, right off Times Square. I could see Times Square from the window. It was so exciting starting this business. So exciting. The same way it had been when I first moved to New York. And I got the same juice for it. And I realized there was just no way I could, reconcile these two different parts, actually 3 parts, if you include my family responsibilities in all this. And I called him and I had to tell him I couldn't do it. I was leaving him in a bind. And I hung up, and it was a real hard moment. And it was there I promised I'm going to get so good at this that I'm going to be able to get back to that. I promised myself that. And it was a pivotal moment in my life.
Under the bio for Forefront on LinkedIn, the first line really sticks out to me. It says, to fully understand business, you need to run your own. Did you know that going into it, or was that something that you reflect back on and go, you know what? That's exactly what happened?
No, I'm a college dropout. I don't have an MBA. And I have taught at 2 different universities for quite some time. But no, I had no idea that, I didn't know how to put together a real good P&L. And my wife, luckily, who has an MBA, taught me that. But if I hadn't started my own business, I'm sure at some point it would have turned into something I need to do. I had run spreadsheets,
Mhm.
on budgets for a marketing department, but there's no income on that. That's just expense. And the way nonprofit theater works, ROI on marketing is something that you pay attention to, but not in the same degree. And so this was a whole new level of, and paying employees out of my own pocket, and getting health insurance, like all this stuff. It was really, and I was young still. At the time I felt like I was super old, but 28, 29 years old, think about that.
Yeah, no, it's funny because when I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, that's the kind of stuff they get stuck on. They get hung up on the idea, what the brand is going to look like, and then there's that minutia, like throughout their taxes as well too, not just payroll and everything else. So that was pretty big awakening for you then when you were starting the
Yeah,
company.
and it was at that moment I realized just how important my life partner was. I mean, she is still doing that for my business today, and we're about the same size now as Forefront was, at its height. Not that big, by the way, like 5 employees, but payroll, health insurance, accounts receivable, accounts payable, legal bills, all the bullshit that I just hate, and she's great at. And so, that is another, like, sometimes you're smart, sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're both. And in this case, yes.
So, did you guys sunset Forefront before you went to Court TV, or did you have it running parallel while you were at Court TV as well?
Court TV was a client. They offered me a job that I actually chased very heavily. About 8 months prior to me going to Court TV, I went to my partners and said, "Look, I'm 90% of all revenue. We all do all the work, but I drive most of the revenue, and it's drying up. The market, there's something happening. People are pulling back marketing budgets. And I think we're going to have to make some very hard decisions." And we just didn't see eye to eye. And Core TV was a client, and they were about to invent a head of marketing job, and I went after it and got it. And so I sold my portion of the company to my partners. So that they went on and continued in a different name called the Michael Allen Group, which existed for another couple decades, I think. And then John Margolis, who wound up running it, sold it to another company. So that had a long life. And then I went to Core TV and learned the television business, because I kind of knew TV a little bit, but I really didn't. I didn't know what affiliates were. I didn't know the cable business or any of that kind of stuff. Certainly, I didn't know anything about marketing nightly TV shows. Don't tell Core TV this. And
Okay, I
and
won't.
it was a really good, and I learned a lot there from Henry Schleif. But Charlie Collier was there, who's now running Roku. He went on to run AMC and Fox. Jen Caserta, who went on to run IFC and a bunch. She's now the head of people, I think, at SoundCloud. David Epstein, who went on to be head of pricing and planning at AMC Networks. Like, we all worked together there at this moment in time, and a whole bunch of other really cool people as well. And it's just, again, one of those magical moments where I just learned the television business at a moment where it was still a rocket ship to the moon. The growth curve was still really there. So it was hard to, all due respect to everybody who worked in cable back then, it was hard to fuck it up. It was a little hard to fuck it up. And so it was a very, very, very fun ride. And then that led to the head of marketing of IFC, not soon after that.
So you make the move to the independent film channel and Sundance TV, and even kind of touching on your role at Core TV. It sounds like as their head of marketing, it's not like you were just limited to having control over the marketing plans. It sounds like you had influence over, I don't know if it's branding or could we say the schedule as well? Because on Core
Yeah,
TV, you
I
said
mean,
you
look,
rebranded around Forensics.
yeah. I mean, look, the head of marketing and the marketing department has a tremendous amount of influence in most networks around the schedule, because they can't sell what people won't watch. And so whether it's the way the night flows or what gets greenlit, I mean, they don't have ultimate control, but things like must see TV. I don't know if you remember
Oh,
that
I
from
remember Must See
NBC back
TV.
in the heydays. Like, that's a marketing spin. That's not a programming, didn't come up with that, right?
Was it ABC that did TGIF? That was their
And
thing?
TG, there's another
Yep.
great
Yep.
one, Dinner and a Movie. Like, there's a
Yep.
ton of different, and Dinner and a Movie was actually created by ad sales marketing.
Was that TBS Dinner and a Movie?
TBS,
Yes,
yes,
TBS. I
remember.
remember that.
So that often does happen. But at Core TV, it was a very tight knit senior suite there under Henry, and He's a lot of things, but he's also very Socratic in the way that he solicits ideas. And we had a meeting where the head of research there, Darren Campo, presented this survey about the word forensics. And it just became clear that the word was much like we were all sitting there going, forensics? But like 90% of the country knew what the word was. And this seems obvious today, but this is before CSI. Like CSI was just hitting air around now, right? And so it wasn't that well known a topic to, I think, to a lot of people, but Quincy had been on the air for a long time. And we had this show called Forensic Files that was doing quite well. But this name recognition became, something that I became hyper obsessed with. And then I convinced the network to create Shark Week only for forensics.
Oh, okay.
And it just worked like huge. And then we rebranded the whole network around the prime time rather than trials. Remember, the name is Core TV.
Yeah. You're
Into
thinking
it.
Judge Judy and things like that.
Right. It was much more investigation. And that worked incredibly well. And by the way, investigation discovery, like people love Forensic Files. I don't know how many episodes. It's got to be close to 800 at this point. And it's a huge franchise, and it worked incredibly well.
There's something about true crime. I don't know what it is. I mean, even if you look at the podcast world, like that is all the research I've seen says that that is the number one genre of podcast is true crime.
I think it's because every person on the planet Earth who's ever lived has the capability of killing someone else. We just choose not to. And so the idea that someone's trying to get away with it fascinates us. And I do think there's something, the mixture of human nature and solving human nature.
We're somewhat vicariously through the podcasts then for that.
It's podcasts, it's Forensic Files. Like
Yep.
it is a huge, huge, huge industry.
So were you in the room then reviewing scripts and green lighting, say, pilot episodes by any chance? And going out and looking at, say, international formats that possibly, even not even the formats, but bringing international programming in for the station, or even looking at formats that could be adapted for Core TV, like Americanized?
Not at Core TV. I didn't. I did read scripts, and I was asked to weigh in on whether or not. And at the point, they were not. They were doing scripted films, like movies of the week. And so I was always asked to weigh in on whether or not this was marketable. And then we did a lot of market testing on that kind of stuff. I then moved to IFC, where I became not only the head of marketing, but not ostensibly, de facto head of the network, because there was no network head. Ed Carroll had taken over AMC and was running both AMC and IFC at this time. And he really needed to pay attention to AMC for a number of different reasons that I'm not going to go into here. So while I wasn't running all aspects of IFC, I was the senior most executive there. And then I got promoted to head of channel 10 months later, general manager at IFC. And at that point, I took over programming. I will say, while I was head of marketing, I took marketing budget and made a series. I'm not 100% sure everybody knew that back then, but that happened. It was called The Festival. I was really
nice. So,
but then I got appointed head of the channel, and then I became head of programming.
Some of your work I want to touch on. So, this film is not yet rated. Is that a Morgan Spurlock film? If I've got it correct?
No, it's Kirby Dick.
Okay.
Who is an Academy Award? I think he's an Academy Award nominee. He did the documentary about sexual abuse in the armed services. He's a pretty noted documentarian, but that's who did that. And Eddie Schmidt produced it.
And your name's you go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
That film, I think the first, I can't remember what year, but I greenlit it at Sundance. And then a year later, it debuted at Sundance. So that was a really fun arc. But yeah, I named that film. If you watch that film, animation is a huge character in that film. That was my input. Klasky Zubo being hired, animation as a tool of storytelling, a bunch of different aspects of that. So, I was an executive producer on that. A lot of executives take EP titles. I take it seriously, and I'm very hands-on creative. I pride myself on never really getting into a major artistic fight with a talent partner. Even though Portlandia is called Portlandia because of me.
Mm.
And that
How did
includes
that come about then?
Fred
'Cause
and Carrie and Lauren Michaels and a whole bunch of other people. And so I had a good deal to do with how that show came about. And there was never a big fight between creative and network there. And I can go through all, and same thing on this film is Night Rating. And Kirby, I love him, notably not one of the easiest human beings in the world to disagree with. And we had disagreements, but we always worked together really, really well. I loved working with him.
when you're working with those types of creatives and you're coming in as the executive producer, do they tend to have their guard up because they might have had a poor experience with, say, an executive producer who might not have had the creative experience that you've had?
Usually an executive producer who's attached before a film is bought is friends with, is somehow connected, is raising money with the main artist, whether it's the writer or the director in the case of a documentary. And so that relationship is usually, I mean, yes, a lot of them do break down in lawsuits, but no more than any other business relationships. I think the thing is, I was running a network, and artists are very, 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 very anxious about, and frankly frustrated with network notes. It is or studio notes. So whether the network is the network or the studio is Universal or Paramount or whatever, studio network notes are infamous for being shitty.
What comes to mind?
Make this funnier.
Yeah,
Can she be taller? Those
just
types
like
of.
that.
Yeah, and there was in fact a really good Twitter handle, bad network notes at one point that I've seen executives who worked for me. I've seen their notes show up on that sort of feed, and my background as an artist refused to let me give notes like that. And so I believe not only do I give active and actionable notes, but I start way earlier. If I'm involved in a project, I'm in at the script stage, and if you don't like my notes, we're probably going to know in 25 minutes. And but I also don't. I've never made a hit movie. I helped make Portlandia. I made This Film Is Not Rated, a bunch of stuff. Please Like Me, Harmon Quest, Shrink. A lot of stuff that I really, really love. But I've never made The Avengers. I've never made Mad Men. So I like the way I give notes. I think artists do as well. But I now write for myself. So history can be its own determinant there.
Two things come to mind when you talk about giving show notes is the morning show on Apple TV, and then the recent film you brought up, Saturday Night, or Lauren Michaels' Saturday Night, where they talk about that first night for the very first episode of Saturday Night Live. If you've seen if you've seen that show or you've seen that movie, do they capture it authentically, or is that Hollywood coming in and hamming up what's really going on behind the scenes?
The SNL one for me was, I think is accurate, just not my vibe. The what was the other one?
The morning show on Apple TV, the Reese
The morning
Witherspoon one.
show felt a little bit, but then it just got so crazy with all the drama. It became too
Yes.
soap opera-y for my taste. So in both cases, I think it was fine. I think Seth Rogen's The Studio, is that what it's called?
I haven't seen it yet, but I know which one you're talking about.
I've never
Yes.
been so uncomfortable seeing myself on camera, and I'm not in it. Okay.
Oh, you're seeing relatable characters though.
Not just relatable characters. I see my behaviors as a channel head, and I see other executives, and it gets outlandish. But I think that one, to me, episodes with what's his name, Joey from Friends, Matt LeBlanc. That to me was as accurate a portrayal of Hollywood as I've ever seen in my life. Painfully so. Painfully so. So those two to me are the two most accurate portrayals of Hollywood that I've seen in quite some time.
Have you by any chance seen the franchise on HBO? It might have been a one and done show, and that's it.
I think it is a one and done. Yeah, I think that's not inaccurate, but again, it veers into ridiculousness so hard at some point. It's hard for me to stay, because I think it must feel like a doctor watching ER. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, man, you're taking me out of it, man. Like, that's not going to happen. And now I can't go with it.
It feels like they
wanted
whipped in
me not to suspend my disbelief, and now I can't. But Rogen's piece in particular, even though it does get super ridiculous. I mean, when Bryan Cranston, spoiler alert, when Bryan Cranston goes crazy at a coke-fueled party in Vegas during what is ostensibly, Show West or whatever, CinemaCon, like, as ridiculous as that all got, and it got very ridiculous at the end, too ridiculous. All along the way, I'm like, yeah, I've been there. Not me personally, but I've seen that happen. I've watched that executive get coffeed up hours before the presentation, just he could be sober on stage. I've seen it happen.
I like how you called it coffeed up. So
What else to call an IV into your arm full of coffee, basically?
inject it right to my heart. So what brought you to participant? Because at this point, you've now taken, I guess that's the top job. You're the president of the company.
I was mostly in charge of TV. Jim Burke was the head of the whole studio. The ability to work directly for a billionaire to start a brand new television enterprise centered on millennials, built around public service and public good.
And this was a cable station, right? It wasn't terrestrial?
This is Jeff Skoll wanting to make TV, and me trying to convince him to make a streaming service and not a television channel, and him compromising and allowing me to buy 2 different television channels and turn them into a hybrid TV and streaming enterprise. And then me failing to sell the industry on the fact that don't take the channel, take the streaming service and offer it to your broadband only subscribers, which this is 2012. You're going to have a big block of broadband only consumers in a very short period of time. This is 2012. And
we are like at the cusp of like House of Cards, I'd say. Because for me, that's always the turning point for streaming. When they dropped that pilot episode for free, my wife was like, get your credit card out. We've got to see the other 11.
And I wrote an article that year called TV and Intervention. And I said, you need a streaming only product today. And then I tried to sell them a streaming only channel. They really only wanted the combination of still cable channel. They begrudgingly took the channel, by the way. It's not easy to sell a cable channel. Because also like it's all kumbaya, goodwill, save the earth programming. Okay, I guess people will watch that. And this was a different time back when that actually people wanted to talk about that out loud in public without fear of being scorned by the right. But here we are. And participant has since closed, by the way. But the idea was to build this channel for a younger audience. And they took the linear channel and the streaming option, but never really leaned into the streaming option. Years later, everything I told them was going to happen happened. And, the product was obviously a few years early to the market, but what we were trying to sell them was the right thing. The Save the World content, it is hard to make a business out of content that is meant to save the world if you also have to sell advertising.
Yes, I can imagine that. Yeah,
that was very difficult. And so that became, a point of conflict inside the company of, can we take advertising from the U.S. Army?
Oh, okay.
Can we take advertising from BP? Can we take advertising from Anheuser-Busch? Can we take advertising from a credit card company? So every pitch became a debate internally, and we got twisted up in knots. But also, I'll tell you, Jeff Skoll was a very nice person to me. I don't know what's happened to him recently based on certain things he's done politically. But the man who ran that business day to day, Jim Burke, was just an inveterate liar and bad person. And so that's why that didn't work out, unfortunately. But it was one of those times where I got, the first times I got paid to walk away.
Nice. Okay.
And, and then had a job relatively quickly. So I got paid twice that year.
Nice.
I offer this piece of advice to the people listening. As many times as you can get paid twice in 1 year, do that.
Yes.
It is very, and it seems odd to say that, but there are moments where, like, if you handle yourself correctly, you can negotiate an exit that allows you to get employed. But you have to think ahead. I did that As I left AMC Networks, I solved an organizational chart problem for them. And in return, I asked to be paid out on certain incentives on a certain time period. We all agreed that it was a win-win for everybody. And that year I got paid twice. So there are times in your life where you're going to be presented with a too crowded executive suite.
I've seen that, top heavy companies.
And if you can negotiate, if you can raise your hand, and by the way, I don't mean just C-suite, like look at the companies now, Paramount, NBC, a bunch of these other companies. There are a bunch of people who I've talked to over the last 2 years who I advised. I said, go solve this problem for them. They need to pick one of you 6 to get rid of, at least one, if not 2. Go raise your hand. They will give you a better package as a result of solving a problem for them, because the money that they pay you as a payout for leaving and a restructuring sits on a different line in the P&L
Okay.
than payroll and benefits. It's a restructure. And so they become more generous when you help them solve those types of organizational chart problems. And then if you're not held to a non-compete because you've helped them solve a problem, you have an opportunity to pay twice. Another one, you have a bunch of people who would love to hire you part-time, negotiate an exit that gives you a bit of a roadmap, but then also gives you an opportunity to be hired as a consultant. Doesn't conflict with your non-compete. You can get paid twice that year. So these are the points in times that people in their 40s and 50s, the points in their careers, you face these decisions. Hopefully you face these decisions. You're not, you have a job and you have these types of opportunities for yourself. Filling up your nest egg at critical moments in time enables you to make decisions like going out on your own at another.
Everyone I've spoken to when we talk about non-competes, some of my friends who are lawyers have all said that non-competes, and I'm only speaking for Canada really right now, in some places like Ontario, non-competes have been banned in most cases.
Yeah,
They've said that
often
they said the non-competes aren't really the issues, but non-solicit clauses. They said they will hold you to the fire and you will lose if you start poaching immediately.
and the courts will uphold that. That is a very, that's like a trade secret to a certain extent. So yeah, no, absolutely. Which is why you just have to be very careful about where you go when you go somewhere. But also, what I would say about the media industry is I think the reason why I've been able to pivot so easily, not easily, it was not easy. I've been fired twice in the last whatever. But each pivot worked well because it wasn't me running from one industry into the same industry. It was me running from one part of the industry into what was next in the industry. And I think a lot of people in the media industry right now are like, where do I go next? And it is much easier if you're going not within, but without. and you're going to find substantially more opportunity at this moment in time if you're a senior executive who makes a certain amount of money and you need to kind of keep doing that outside of media as a media expert than you are inside media as a media expert.
So when you are at a job and you see that next opportunity and it becomes clear to you that opportunity isn't going to make its way into your current role or even the current company, what steps do you take? Do you find that leader on LinkedIn, reach out to them? Like, is there a bit of personal selling that goes on? Like, what advice would you give to someone who's like, Evan, that's a great idea, but how do I move forward with it?
Yeah, good question. I don't do a lot of, I don't do it. This is going to sound really weird. I do marketing. I say, listen to my podcast. I do once in a while, whenever I publish a link, go to my newsletter, but I'm not, it's here's a bunch of content first. I think that the key element, well, there's 2 major key elements. The first is wake up stupid.
Okay, that's interesting.
If you're not retraining your brain in some increment daily, you will fall behind. And I'll give you a good example. I was on stage at Stream TV in Denver last month, and the Shorts site or app, Real Shorts, came up. Do you know that?
And no, I'm unfamiliar with it.
And it's a short film app, real short, actually, not shorts. And it's basically feature films cut into 3-minute increments that
Okay.
you pay as you go. It's not a subscription. Born in China, no surprise, home of TikTok. And it's become, I think it's now the most downloaded app in the US, I believe. But it is crushing it. And it's increasingly become the obsession of Hollywood. I was on stage at Stream TV. I asked the audience there, had anyone heard of it? Almost no one in the audience had. And so in that moment, I was able to kind of like give a nice moment of discovery to a room full of people. If and unless you're out there kind of learning about things around you and adjacent to where your career is and where you want it to go on a daily basis, you are going to fall behind to the people who know what real short is. You know what I mean? Like there are going to be other people who are chosen ahead of you.
In that example, did you become, for the industry and your peers at that conference, did you become the immediate subject matter expert on that? Like everyone must have been coming up to you and talking about it after and following up.
Well, I've become what's fascinating is I've become the subject matter expert, and the subject is media, and I've become the media's subject matter expert. There are others, Alan Woke, Marion Ranchette. There are obviously other people, but the reason why people are okay calling me the media cartographer is because most people understand that, like, no, he really does map the future of the media universe. That's what he does for a living. People have accepted that as a reality. And the only reason that is because every day I wake up and discover something new about our universe, and then I share it. So that is the lesson. If you're in an interview and you're telling somebody who's interviewing you something they already know, you're not going to stand out. But if you're telling them something they haven't heard before,
Good
you
point.
will.
Yeah.
You will. And that's true on LinkedIn as well. So if you're sharing a thought or a point of view, and by the way, it's not always like a fact, like real short. Sometimes it's, hey, it's a observation about data that we all have access to. And that's really the story of, my brand. I took all these numbers and turned them into a map, and I do that with other charts. But having a point of view that others can't see because you are more read on the topic, that's always going to be of value. So wake up stupid. The other part of it is, if you're selling, you're probably losing. And marketing is not content, but content is great marketing. And so I would argue that if you want opportunity from your network on LinkedIn, be responsible for putting out information or content on a regular basis that pulls the algorithm into you. And there are two reasons for that. First and foremost, the more people who are in your orbit, the more opportunity that's going to come your way. And then secondarily, if you do get a conversation with someone who's connected to you on LinkedIn, they already come to the table having some idea of your worth. And so it's less incumbent upon you in that conversation to really explain how your mind works. But on top of that, even if they have no idea who you are, if you're doing a cold outreach on LinkedIn through a DM to ask about something or another, the first place they're going to go is your LinkedIn page. Not some of the time, not 90% of the time, 100% of the time, they're going to click on your name and they're going to look at your LinkedIn page to see if you're a fucking lunatic or not. And so then what's there really, really matters. Is it boring? Are they going to leave in 2 seconds because there's nothing to read? Is it interesting and they linger longer than they thought they should on a LinkedIn page? And hey, I got to meet this person. Or is it lunatic and I got to get away from this person, block? That really matters. But that continuum of what I just talked about, waking up, learning something new, sharing it with your network, using it as not just a marketing tool, but also as a landing page, as a front page to the retail store of your career. Those are crucially important connective points in this moment in time. If you work in media and you are an executive, if you're not like a writer, a screenwriter or something like that. The other last part I'll leave you is don't worry about impressing the entire world. Like, I have a decent LinkedIn following. It's not about building a LinkedIn following of X number. It's about igniting the network you have. You have a brand today. You have a network today. Whatever that number is, go after them. It's about the network effect. It's not about branding. It's about igniting the network. The network effect, if you look it up, is about 1 to 1 to 1 to 1. It's not about 1 to many. It's Facebook. I get a dozen people to sign up. They tell a dozen people each, and you're off to the races. So even if you have 100 connections on LinkedIn, excite them about something. And in a week, you'll have 125. And then 5 weeks, if you excite those 125, in 5 weeks, you'll have 300, and so on and so on and so on and so forth. And then opportunity will actually start coming to you as opposed to you having to always chase it.
Speaking of opportunity coming to you, did the role at NBC Universal, your EVP role, did that find you or did you find it?
I found that. Um, well, no, a combination. So I had a long history in my corporate career. I was not a very good corporate citizen in that I just don't play politics all that well, but I am charming. And that's how I got the jobs. I lost them.
When you say that you don't play politics very well, does that mean that there's a bit of an absence of diplomacy that you have to do to work the room of executives, or were you the type of person that had no problem calling bullshit?
If you read my LinkedIn profile, it's pretty much how I talked inside the halls of Comcast. I didn't say it externally because I knew better than that.
Gotcha.
But when someone asked my opinion about something, I'm like, that idiot's a fucking idiot. You know what I mean? Like,
I know what you're saying.
your business is doomed. That's how I got the job, by the way. That's the irony of the disruptor, right? The entrepreneur. You get the job by telling the CEO, your business is doomed. You're going to be out of business in 20 years. There's no question about it. And if you don't do something, you're going to be out of a job relatively quickly. And he goes, oh, well, yeah, you're right. And here's a lot of money and go do this. And then they love you. And then at some point, that same exact personality becomes grating.
Mm.
And you're out. Jason Kilar has had, similar experiences. You could talk to him. He got paid a lot more to walk away than I did. But Comcast was another time where they were like, it's just not working out here. But there was a larger point. Oh, that was the not playing politics well. So yeah, this personality doesn't live well inside kind of the calm halls. As a consultant who can come in and tell you like it is and back it up with data and back it up with the truth and back it up with research, people actually do appreciate it. They just don't want it. You don't need that kind of energy 100% of the time. And I agree. I don't want to live inside those halls 100% of the time. I don't enjoy it. But this relationship I have with corporate America seems to work out.
And so let's bring things full circle then. So you move on from NBC Universal. How many feet out the door did you have when you started your consultancy, when you brought everything together here with ESHAP?
What do you mean? Oh, how long? How? No, that was a summarial firing. We did not agree on the future of CISO at Comcast.
Oh, okay.
And there's a great article in Vulture about the whole thing that I highly encourage you reading. It's a very entertaining read.
So it's specific to you leaving the company then, that article you're referencing, and I'm going to check it out. And if that's the case, is that difficult seeing kind of like your work life play out in print like that?
What was hard is that the writers who wrote that article worked on it for like a year and a half, and they were already writing it when they talked to me, and they asked me. I mean, they kept coming back to me. I just kept assuming it was dead, which was fine with me because like it could have gone very badly, and they kept coming back to me. And they're like, just 16 more questions. And so I knew it was going to come out, and I was very nervous about it, to be honest with you. And then I read it, and I think it's incredibly fair. So I'm very relieved. I mean, I chose to participate, and I don't think NBC Universal did. And so, I think that allowed me to tell my story without necessarily comparison to theirs. But they did talk to so many people. I was very nervous about how I would be portrayed. And it's not the first and nor will it be the last time that my career is written about in the trade press. But I read it and I see myself, and good and bad, by the way. I was too optimistic with projections, but that's kind of sometimes how I see the world. But at the same time, I was also very responsible, and I made the company a lot of money, $100 million on the office alone. And so, I felt that the relationship between myself and the artists who work there, who were quoted, and the staff who work there are quoted, is well captured and honestly captured. And I'm pretty proud of how that story gets told in that piece.
Does it provide a little bit of, I guess, self-validation for your success? Because if they're writing about you, it means that you're a big deal and you
Well,
are a mover and shaker.
I'm an attention whore. So success is when they spell your name right, even if they talk poorly about you.
Oh,
Um,
I love that quote. Oh, that's
Yeah. Well,
great.
that I did not. I may have been the first to put the words in that order, but I am not the first person to say that. I mean, Donald Trump is president of the United States again because of that. I mean, he believes it more than anybody, and he is the personification of that. So I need to be careful of how I put myself out there. I am very careful. I would much rather not be written about poorly. I am an attention whore. But I also don't care if you don't like what I say. If you think I was mean to someone, or if you think I was an asshole, or if you think I was um, lying or misrepresenting something, then please tell me. And I think I've been relatively good about, when being publicly called out like that, which I have a number of times, owning it and correcting. And I think it's part of my brand now, that please tell me when I'm wrong, please. But if you tell me I'm wrong and you don't have the facts to back it up, yeah, I'm going to say bullshit. And if you don't like that, if your feelings are hurt by the truth, then I don't have time for that. And that's been who I am for a decent amount of time.
It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Winston Churchill. He says, "History will be kind to me, for I intend to write it."
Well, yeah. I mean, right now, I do love what I do, because what I do kind of is who I am. And the chronicling of our industry in real time that I do for a living really does give me the opportunity to not just write the history, but I actually think over the last couple of years, I'm not here just as an analyst. I am shipping something. I am selling something, as Churchill was as well. And there I just compared myself to Donald Trump and Winston Churchill in 2 minutes. But crucially, I'm trying to sell the change to the industry that it needs. And I believe that it's working. I really do. I do believe, if you look at the behavior of all the major broadcasters in the UK, I will take some small credit for that. Their ability to start to think about the creator economy as part of their overall enterprise, for the first time, has all happened since we all started talking to each other, either in the media or behind closed doors.
Well, I want to skip ahead on that point because I don't know if it's the most recent or the next to recent episode of the Media Odyssey. You were in Cannes and you were interviewing three British creators, and I think two of them were from actual major broadcasters. BBC was definitely represented, and I think the other might have been Channel 4, but the one that stood out for me was Amelia de Moldenberg from Chicken Shop
Okay.
Gate. Yes. So,
Yeah, so that episode is up right now. You can listen to it. It actually includes Keeley Smith Bino, who's the star. If you know the show here in North America, Ghosts, with Utkarsh and a whole bunch of other people. It's a CBS show. I'm pretty sure it plays in Canada as well. Anyway, the British version, which predates that, he's the star of that. Jasmine Dawson, who runs BBC Studios, and actually, I think, has architected their creator mindset business model. BBC Studios has their official North Star is fandom first, creator mindset business model. That is mind blowing, right?
for the
And
BBC, yes.
I mean, and it's just, I mean, it's a real paradigm shift for them, right? And I don't know that I did not guide them through it, but they have been looking at the industry, and Channel 4 did this a while ago, and then ITV agreed to do it. BBC Studios has been working on this for a while. Bluey has a 10 million YouTube subscriber channel. So is Planet Earth. But some of the thinking that they've been doing recently has been influenced by the work we've been doing there. So yeah, no, I'm very happy to have had a decent amount of influence on that market. Channel 4, who we interviewed on the pod. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's get back to Amelia de Muldenberg. What's also fascinating is we pulled Amelia de Muldenberg on the pod as well, thanks to BBC Studios. And it was just a great conversation. She shows, I think in particular, the entrepreneurial business mindset that a creator has to have, and that why I believe creators are going to have a competitive edge over the next decade or two over traditional media producers, production companies and studios who operate on a very fat old model. We had Amelia on. She talked about all the aspects of business and why she doesn't actually integrate brands into her episodes and works with brands outside the episodes. But then yesterday we interviewed Dar Man, who's one of the largest creators on the face of the earth, for the podcast. That episode will be out next week. This is a guy who makes 5 hours of original scripted programming every single week at a fraction of the price per minute of the major studios, and has 25 million subscribers on YouTube. Is he as profitable as Universal Studios? No. At the same time, will Universal Studios continue to operate at the same kind of margin for the next 25 years? Probably not.
No, probably not is right.
And so who's got the better future-proofed model here? And by the way, I first met Dar at Cannes Lion, and the brands were around him like, bees to honey. They were swarming him, big brands. So, and Amelia too, by the way. And by the way, Amelia, and I mean this respectfully, only has 3 or 4 million YouTube subscribers. So it
She
isn't
she talks about
only
that
about,
too,
yeah,
how
yeah.
subscribers aren't important in the interview. And one thing I like too is that she goes back and talks about those first 5 episodes, because something as a budding creator like myself, I will go back and I will look at a couple of other people who have really made it or I respect to see what their first episodes look like. And I tell people, I go find Joe Rogan's very first episode. It looks like a bad webcam video. 3 guys in a chair sharing a mic. Are you familiar with the podcast Modern Wisdom with Chris Williamson?
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
His very first episode is just him and his friends around like a Halo microphone talking about their gym routines, and look where it grew to from there. So I really like hearing those stories. That was a really great episode.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, she started as a teenager doing interviews for a neighborhood magazine. So it's not like, and that story, like, you talk to people in our industry who deride creators as influencers or whatever, as not art or not premium. And then you talk to these artists about how crafted each one of their stories are. You may not like it. It may not be for you, but their audiences believe it to be premium. They see it as premium. And the evolution of her as a teenager, starting her own business, she has her own studio. Same thing with Dar, resurrecting a career that had gone off the rails in another industry, and then becoming one of the most important fictional storytellers on the face of the earth. And I'll say that aloud in a room full of traditional media people, and they'll laugh when I say one of the most important scripted storytellers on the face of the earth. And I look back at them and I can see them signing their own death warrant.
They don't want to admit it's become democratized. A lot of creative people that would have otherwise been left behind now have an opportunity to express themselves and control their own destiny.
And that's something I would say to a lot of people who maybe aren't the creator, or the writer or the producer or the director, but are executives in our industries, right? From tens and tens of thousands of people who are now a little bit anxious about where their careers are headed. Darman has a staff of 200.
Wow. Okay. That is a studio. That's
So,
not even a small
I
studio.
don't think Amelia has that big a team, but she has a team, right?
She
You
said
know,
she had a full-time social media manager and then someone else, but her team was only her and 2 other people, and everyone else were freelancers, I believe it
but
was.
she's getting bigger every day. Dude Perfect is building $100 million studio in Texas. So the jobs that are leaving traditional media, they are emerging somewhere else. And if you don't think that, there's not a head of HR or a head of finance or a head of, legal in all these areas, whether it's outsourced or in-house, there are going to be massive amounts of opportunity in media outside of traditional media over the next 25 years if you know how to capitalize on it.
Evan, I want to be mindful of time because we still have to get to rapid fire questions, but you mentioned it early on that you are also teaching. You're also a professor. I believe you've taught at NYU and you're currently teaching at Fordham, or is it the other way around?
Actually, I taught at NYU for 18 years and I taught at Fordham for about 5. And this year I'm going to take a sabbatical from teaching because I have so much travel coming up.
How does the curriculum look? Like if you go back and look at your very first class you taught and you go back and say, okay, I'm still teaching this class, 15 years later, X number of years later, how has that class or how has the curriculum evolved? And do you even find yourself tearing up the curriculum halfway through the semester going, nope, something else changed and this has got to be inserted. This is way more important than what we were originally going to talk about.
Yeah, the reason the map exists is that it was meant to be a dashboard for that class. I created it for the class. And this is well after I had started teaching, but from day one, the class was always intended to be about media in real time. And so each, I know what the curriculum is going to be. I know what the topic is in each class at the beginning of the semester, but the specific lesson for each class is written in the weeks leading up to it based on information that comes out. There's one class every semester about whatever quarter earnings drop during that semester,
Gotcha. Yeah.
whether it's third or first, and you know, but when I teach the class on audio, a couple of things. One, I go out and look at the market capitalization of all the companies who work in audio right now, which includes Spotify, but also includes Apple and Amazon and Google, and SoundCloud, and not yeah, Deezer and Hive and a couple of others, and do the same kind of market analysis that way. But I also look at last year's album sales and downloads and all that kind of and live concert revenues as well. And so that lesson of audio is never going to. And then, by the way, I usually bring in Jamie Myers, who works at Sony podcasting, Sony Music Podcasting, to come in and also be interviewed and talk about her experiences in audio as well. So it's that audio class is never the same. The measurement class is never the same. It's always taught in real time. And then we spend every class, the first third of class, talking about the things that are happening in the media universe that week. Every week, there's an announcement that you need to kind of digest, right? I mean, NVIDIA became the first company to cross the $4 trillion
Mhm.
mark this week. For this class, 3 years ago, I wrote a
I
lesson
saw that
plan.
LinkedIn post. Yeah, you
Yeah,
called that.
I said this was going to happen. But I will tell you, if not for teaching this class over the last 18 years, there's absolutely no way. That class taught me my process. My week to week daily process is in large part built around the framework that I designed for that class over 14 weeks at each semester, including the map itself, which was created first to teach the class to use it in a lesson plan.
So it's made you a better researcher and presenter, I'd say.
It's given me the edge in the media ecosystem that someone might perceive that I have.
That's funny because one of the best ways I used to study in university was if I knew the content, I would teach it to someone else who was having issues. And I found that that actually helped me get a better grade or do better on my assignments and quizzes.
In order to explain something to someone else, you have to see it from a different angle. You immediately examine the same problem from a different angle. Even if you solve it exactly the same way, you can't describe it the way that you did it the first time because now you know the answer That's
Yeah.
not how it works. Like describing a mystery, knowing who did it. Okay, you're going to describe it a lot differently knowing who did it than before. So yeah, absolutely. There's no question about it. And then also having to stand up in front of a room full of, at NYU, 60 students who pay more per semester than any college students on the face of the earth at 6:30 on a Monday and be entertaining while talking about data. There's no question that doing that for a decade or more has made me substantially better at communicating the importance of certain data and certain trends. Not only did the mechanism give me the ability to see where the trends were going, the process of teaching it has given me the ability to articulate it in a narrative that makes sense to other people.
Evan, this has been a fantastic chat. Are you ready for rapid fire questions?
I am, yes.
Okay, the campaign you're most proud of.
Free Will for Shakespeare in the Park in 1990, I want to say 4.
Your favorite movie.
Casablanca.
If Hollywood were to make a movie based on your life story, who would you want to play you?
Depends on what age. I mean, obviously Timothy Chalamet, because how can you not at this point?
He
But
can play everyone.
I think he's me at a younger age. And then this is odd because he's a foot taller than me. But I have two people I get compared to facially who I both think could play the role incredibly, incredibly well because they're both very talented actors are Jim Carrey and Robert Downey Jr. But people tell me I look like them. I don't personally see it, but I have been told that.
Good selections, though, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, Iron Man and
And The Mask.
and Ace Ventura Pet
All right. If Hollywood were to see, I love how the fact we're going back and forth about what we think of when we think of Jim Carrey. You went Ace Ventura, I went The Mask, and was about to drop the Riddler in there.
Well, no, that we should never speak of that performance.
I speak of that before Batman and Robin. But anyways, I digress.
That's true.
So my follow-up, if Hollywood were to make that movie based on your life story, what would we call it?
Pretzels and Coffee.
Your favorite book?
Cavalier and Clay by Michael Chabon.
Your favorite song?
Big Shot, Billy Joel.
The best advice you have ever received?
Play the Lie.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self advice, what would you say?
Yeah, trust yourself. It's all going to work out.
And my signature closing question, if you weren't in media and marketing, what would you be doing and why?
I think I'd probably be in well, is this media stand up?
Nah,
It's
we
not.
won't. No, if you want to,
Yeah.
if you want to count that, we can do that.
I mean, if I could be successful at it, I don't know that I can be successful. I'm very glad I'm in media and marketing and don't have to do stand up, but that would be the choice I would make because I can't play baseball. I'd love to play baseball, but I can't.
Particular team you play for?
The Phillies.
The Phillies? Okay. All right. Evan, this has been a wonderful chat. We're going to end things right here. Thank you so much. I know you're a busy guy, so thanks for the time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much.